Yasmin stared down at the words on her wrist, rubbing across them as a sort of habit. Her eyes flashed up once again to the front of the classroom, but she held back a sigh as the teacher still didn't hold her interest. Gosh, why did math have to be required? She glanced to the other side of the classroom, observing the back of the brunette's head. She smirked. At least he looked as bored as she did. Yasmin leaned back in her seat as her fingers traced along her wrist once again. Glancing down, she read the same 2 words she had read 1,000 times. I'm Spider-Man. For the first 15 years of her life, she didn't have a clue what those words meant. But soon after her 15th birthday, a certain superhero made his debut. She remembered watching him for the first time on YouTube, the name sparking her interest because of the words tattooed on her skin. It had been over a year since then, and Spider-Man only grew in fame. The fact that her soulmate might be the superhero scared her to death. She couldn't watch the news anymore out of fear that he could get hurt, and she couldn't do anything about it. Then again, her soulmate could be someone just claiming to be the hero, and that possibility gave her a small source of hope. It could really still be anyone. Just because it had the hero's name didn't mean it was him, even if a large part of her knew that wasn't true. From the moment she saw him, she was filled with a pull that she couldn't explain. Anytime someone mentioned him, her heart would skip. Any fight they mentioned that he was involved in filled her with worry. She pushed all of this aside, claiming to just be a big fan of him and his work. Finally, the bell rang and Yasmin grabbed her bag before rushing out of the classroom, eager to get home. The only thing she stopped for was to let Peter catch up. Peter had been her best friend since they started Midtown when they sat next to each other in their first class. Both nervous, nerdy, and a bit shy, they quickly bonded. The tie between them had stayed strong for all these years. You look like you were having the time of your life in there, Yasmin said, small smirk on her face. Yeah, I was having a great time watching you drool out of boredom, Peter shot back. Yasmin gasped in fake shock. How dare you! I do not drool. Peter grinned. How would you know? You're usually asleep when you do. Sounds like you watch me in my sleep, she said as they neared their lockers. You creep. I'm a creep, Peter began to sing as she opened her locker. I'm a weirdo. What the? Shut your mouth before I do it for you, Yasmin said, but she couldn't hide her grin. Peter puts up his hands to defend himself. It's my job to mock everything you do. You should know that by now. She rolled her eyes. Whatever. You still on to study tonight? He cringed, and Yasmin's heart dropped. Of course. I'm really sorry, but I have the Stark internship. Yep. Got it, she muttered, closing her locker. It came out more bitter than she meant it. Or maybe not. Look, Yasmin, I'm sorry. If I ever want to get a job there, you need to be dependable for Mr. Stark. Believe me, Peter. You've told me enough times. Peter's face filled with guilt, and Yasmin's mood softened. Peter, don't worry about it, she said, tone much more kind. You go do what you need to do. I'll be waiting, okay? And if you get a chance, stop by. It's never too late. He gave her a grateful smile before wrapping his arms around her in a hug. You are the best, Yasmin. I'll stop by later. Promise. Good, she said, smiling as they separated. Now go be the best intern ever. Like I'm not already? He said, waving behind him as he rushed away. See ya. See ya, she muttered, smile fading. She watched after her before blowing air between her lips. She hated it when he left her, but what kind of friend would he be if she didn't let him pursue his dreams? Still, it didn't stop her from worrying sometimes. He was always so busy between his internship and school and helping his Aunt May. She decided it would be best to just leave him be. She didn't want to be a burden. Whenever he asked, she would always let him do his thing, even if it meant missing his company, and his smile, and his laugh that made her stomach flip, and those beautiful eyes that made her— No! Stop it, Yasmin, she thought. She had barely realized she was almost at her building. She was so busy thinking. Those sorts of thoughts were coming to mind more and more often, and she hated it. In a world of soulmates, crushes always sucked. You could like someone, hoping and praying and wishing they'd be the one meant for you in that awful state of infatuation, but always the feeling would fade until you met the one truly meant for you. But why did it feel so different with Peter? Instead of past crushes, Yasmin didn't stutter over her words when talking to him. She didn't work herself up before seeing him or feel like she had to show off. It was just Peter. And for some reason, it was exactly that was ruining her. She'd walked up her final flight of stairs, legs burning. She had lived in this apartment for how many years, and somehow she still could barely make it up. Once inside her room, she fell into her bed. Her eyes closed. Lately, everything was so difficult. She had that bubbling feeling in her stomach for Peter, but she never got to see him much anymore. At the same time, she still felt that constant pull to the Spider-Man, and yet she wasn't ever going to meet him at this rate. With a long sigh, Yasmin finally sat up to ease her mind with her homework, something she had been doing a lot lately. A few hours passed, but Yasmin wasn't very aware of it. That is, until she heard a knock on her bedroom door. "Come in," she yelled out, figuring it would be her mom, but before she really knew what was happening, arms wrapped around her. She tensed. "If that's not Peter Parker and I'm being kidnapped, please say now and save me the heart attack." That laugh. What if it's Peter Parker and I'm kidnapping you? She rolled her eyes and grinned. Then I'd feel so betrayed that our lovely friendship was all a lie. Oh gosh, that laugh. Nope, no lies. I'm not kidnapping you. Promise. Yasmin turned around in her chair to face him. A string of curse words ran through her as she stared into those eyes. "I'm glad you could make it," she said, smiling. "I figured I ditched on you enough," he said. He walked over to her bed, and she saw him wince as he sat down. Her eyes widened as she saw the large bruise on his face. She leapt onto her feet, rushing over to Fred. "Peter, what the heck happened? Why are you—" "Yasmin, I'm fine," she scoffed as she sat beside him, her fingers quickly grabbing his chin, turning his face towards her in the moment of blind worry and confidence. "No, you're bruised and beaten up. That doesn't qualify as fine." Her eyes traced across the growing bruise on his cheek, tracing up to meet his eyes. Suddenly, she realized how close they were. The hand holding his chin dropped and she slid back as a warm feeling grew on her cheeks. "Were you mugged or something? Where else are you hurt? Does May know? Have you told—" "Yasmin!" He took a deep breath. "I'm fine. I'm really fine, okay? Just a bit bruised. Nothing that hasn't happened before." His eyes widened as the words left his mouth. Oh shit. "Happened before?" Yasmin stood up from the bed. Her mind was racing. All those times he had seemed to suck in a tight breath when they hugged, those days he looked almost like he was wearing some sort of makeup to cover something up, all of the bruises on his arms and legs he told her were from him being clumsy? How is she so stupid? Peter, what is going on? It's not normal for teenagers to just show up places bashed up. He looked scared. "Yasmin, you have to trust me. Is this from whatever the Stark internship is?" She was sick with worry. Her stomach turned over and over again, mind moving faster than her words as she spoke. "Have you been using it as some sort of excuse? Where the heck do you go, Peter? Why—" "I'm Spider-Man." As soon as the words left his mouth, she froze. A sudden chill overtook her body and the marks on her wrists stung like fire, but she didn't dare move. Peter's eyes stared into hers. Those beautiful brown eyes filled with fear. Finally, Yasmin swallowed thickly. You're him." Words were barely audible to her own ears, and for a moment she thought he hadn't heard, but his eyes widened. She watched as his hand shot to his wrist, rubbing over where she knew invisible words must lay. Slowly, he stood. "Yasmin, Whatever he was about to say was lost as she threw her arms around him. She felt him smile into her hair as he held her tight. "It's you," she said into his shoulder. I wanted it to be you. I wanted it to be you too," he said softly. Finally, she pulled away, hand still gripping his. She leaned forward until her forehead rested on his and looked into his tear-filled eyes. "Don't cry," she said. but he only chuckled as he wiped a tear off her cheek that she didn't know was there. Her eyes closed as she smiled at the feeling of him being so close. He was her soulmate. His lips met hers in a moment that felt like 1,000 lifetimes, making her feel like she was flying. She smiled up at his nervous face as she looked at him. She could stay like this forever, but then she remembered something. Peter? Are you really Spider-Man?
I feel like I am flying. I don't wanna come down.